This is Dave Meltzer with Entrepreneurs the Playbook. I am so excited. I have my doppelganger on the line here. She is an enlightened entrepreneur. Number one New York Times bestseller. Everybody probably knows her. International speaker, author, coach. Gabby Bernstein, welcome to the Playbook.
What's up, man? It's so nice to be with you.
Right on. I love your new setup. You're sounding great, looking even better. We were just discussing backgrounds, and I've been blessed to be around extraordinary people for a long time. And my brother, who's a rabbi, is always like, why are so many people so dysfunctional? And I like to tell him, I think everybody's dysfunctional, and it's a matter of how do we function within the dysfunction. And the first thing is awareness. And looking through your journey, I was really curious of that evolution of awareness, of the healing that took place, the things you talk about in your books. How did that journey of awareness happen for you?
Yeah, I think that journey of awareness comes when we are brave enough to go to the places that scare us. When we decide that running is no longer an option and that survival and the willingness to thrive is our guiding force. So I think that's been probably the through line throughout my journey spiritually as a spiritual student and a woman who's been in many forms of recovery and also a teacher. Similar to you, I have a history of abuse in my childhood, which I only remembered when I was 36 years old. But I believe that which then led to drug addiction and alcoholism. And what I've been really accepting and understanding is that most addicts, most severe addicts do suffer from trauma. All people have trauma of some form, small or crazy. But typically an addict has a trauma, whether they remember it or not. The traumatic events create energetic disturbances, and the ways that we avoid having to feel that pain, that fear, that discomfort, that grief, that shame, all the feelings that go along with trauma, we anesthetize them through the drink, the drug, the work, the sex, whatever it is that we use to avoid having to. I don't even want to use the word avoid, because sometimes you don't even know that it's there. It's just too terrifying to even touch. So you'll do whatever you can to not have to feel it. And this is an unconscious process of, you're not conscious. Sometimes you get to a point where you're consciously like, I'm going to pick up that drink right now and just drink this away. But typically it's that when we are in a traumatized when we are a traumatized person, we don't function with our whole brain. We don't have the capacity to move from a trigger into a resourced part of ourselves. But when we're in that trigger, we want to avoid the feeling. So we'll lash out, we'll act out, we'll pick up a drink, we'll do whatever we have to do to not feel that discomfort. So the gift that I have been given was that inciting incident, or however many there have been throughout my life, because as a result of having been gifted with this traumatic experiences throughout my life, and one, some in particular, and I call it a gift, it gave me this great level of understanding and awareness of what it means to go on the journey towards freedom. And that journey has been my life's work and my personal mission and commitment to becoming free. And that's why today I can stand very confidently, 15 years as a spiritual teacher, 15 years sober, really stand here and say, I have survived and I thrive, and I can teach you how to do the same.
It's amazing because, our journeys have been so similar. Our books are similar. Our coaching, our speaking is similar. And you just brought something up I never really realized about myself, because I was abused at 9 by my oldest stepbrother. And then when he was passing away, he had died of HIV. He called me out of guilt. I had no idea until he called me. That's how blacked out.
Yeah, so did I. I didn't remember. Yeah, so you dissociate. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yet, as I went through this journey, I was 23 when he called. So I'm 52 now, almost 30 years of figuring out that of emotional, energetic effect. And what really assisted me was 13 years ago, I started meditating. Theta meditation is the mechanism that I did. And I was tricked into meditating, I tell people, because I met a guru on a plane, a medical doctor, and she told me that she could raise my awareness by raising my vibration through meditation. And I wasn't really interested until she said, because I was so focused in on making money. That was one of my outlets, just money. And so she said, well, I could raise your awareness when to buy or sell, because I was so anti-meditation, and she said I was so full of light and I was blocking it. And so she used that money as a catalyst. And
however you get there, David.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And often it is those addictions that we lean on that are the catalyst for our spiritual awakening. So we obviously both know that as sober people. And you said something earlier too about how we're all traumatized, right? And I think that being able to be shame shifters in a time like this and bring voice to trauma, to normalize it, to accept that these things happen is extremely important right now, because we're seeing a lot of suicide, a lot of medical professionals killing themselves. We're seeing people killing themselves because of financial insecurity. And these are people that may not have otherwise had mental illness. So we have to really start to speak very openly and very publicly about trauma, what it does to your brain, what it does to your habitual patterns, and where it can take you, and then give whatever support we can to people, because we've been through it. And there's no question that woman sat with you next to the plane. There's no question that like I said earlier, the gift I was given of having a traumatic event has given me the opportunity to teach with authority.
And that comes from shifting your paradigm or perspective into finding light, love, and lessons in everything. And it's one of the things I try to communicate, because my mission in life is to empower over 1 billion people to be happy by finding, 1,000 of the Gabby Bernsteins in the world and saying, all right, let's go after this. You empower 1,000 to empower 1,000, 1,000 times 1,000 is a million, 1,000,000 times 1,000 is a billion. And yet the one component that's difficult is we can make and simplify happiness, which is such a powerful virus, in my opinion. It's shared by witnessing. It strengthens our immune system. But if someone's depressed, anxious, in the throes of addiction, to tell them to look at the glass half full doesn't do it, but to have a practice that allows you to find the light, the love, and the lessons, and even the worst circumstances, which, I don't put judgments or conditions on anything, but other people will say, oh my gosh, Gabby and Dave went through this horrific thing. I can go through this horrific thing. And where did they find the light, and how did they find the light? So my question to you is that.
Well, I think that it's really important to recently, as you know, everyone's on Facebook Live and Instagram and podcasting. And I was listening to Deepak say something the other day on a video where he said, sometimes when you're in the midst of that crisis and in the midst of that chaos, you can't just jump into the next best feeling thought. You can't just necessarily even jump into the meditation. So that's where guidance comes. That's where a guided meditation practice could come, where you lean on another resource to help you get back to center. But just as we know, having been sober people, that the commitment to your willingness to feel better is really the first step. So if you are like, there's absolutely no way that I can get off the floor right now and help myself, and there's no way that I can feel better in this moment or choose a better thought or even contemplate breathing, but I can be willing to feel better. I'm willing to receive help. I'm willing to change. I'm willing to put down the drink or the drug. I'm willing. That is a prayer. Willingness is a prayer. It's a conscious communication with the part of with your higher self, with the voice of your intuition, the inner wisdom, or a God of your own understanding. When you say that prayer, I'm willing to be free, in whatever form that means to you, invisible doors will open for you. You'll listen to this podcast now. You'll see that audio that you needed to see right now. You'll find whatever teacher is meant to be your teacher the same way that teacher found you on a plane. So that there's no accidents when you open up your consciousness to receive guidance. And so I really want to simplify it for people. It's not, yes, have a meditation practice. Yes, have, a support system. Yes, therapy. Yes, all these things that we can say, yes. Do all of these things that I would suggest. I'm going to write an entire book about these resources, but you got to take it one step at a time. And the first step is willingness.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I was speaking with Deepak last week, had him and also as well as Gotham, and we were talking about what people take for granted. And I think it's a great practice to take inventory of what we feel we're taking for granted so that we can not only recognize, but remember the value that we have in the things. And he brought up existence as the number one thing that he feels through this compressed time of uncertainty that people take for granted. And I think things that happen, how do you process, our own existence and our ability to take that for granted as a humanity?
So I really do believe that we are spirits having a human experience. I genuinely believe that for myself. I'm not pushing that on anybody else. Everybody has their own perspective of why we're here and how we're here. But I do believe that our soul had a choice and said, I'm going to come back and I'm going to go through these difficult experiences. I'll be abused as a child. I'll become a drug addict. I'll remember trauma at 36 so that I can return to love. I can unlearn my fears, remember the love of who I am, and then be a conduit through which that love is expressed. I think everyone has that opportunity in life because no one can come through this life without having a traumatic event. I have a lot of friends that have like very charmed lives, and now they're here hit with the coronavirus, and they're like, "Whoa, I've never experienced this before." But even someone telling you you're stupid at 10 years old is a turning point for people. So we all come into this world, and I have a 16-month-old son. So we all come in and I see his innocence and I see his awareness. And I'm also so aware of each imprint that's occurring for him because I'm a conscious parent, right? And so I'm watching and I'm witnessing and I see all the developmental fears that show up and, the ways that he'll maybe avoid something that he did yesterday and whatever it may be. So we're not immune to the world's experiences, but if we come into this life believing that we have a spiritual assignment ahead of us, and that's to unlearn the fears of the world and remember the truth of who we are, which is a spiritual presence that has the capacity to feel free no matter what's happening around us. That's easy for me to say sitting here in my house and talking to you on, technology. So I want to be real about that. You could be in extreme suffering, but that's actually where you need it most. The more we suffer, the more we need a faith of our own understanding. Well, I would say everybody needs it right now. That was a long answer. I could just go off.
No, me too. And it's interesting because I talk about frequency and I consider myself a transcoder. One of my learned lessons is to be able to create a frequency with a strong signal and a wide spectrum for the same ideas that exist in all time by many people, but to be able to share it in a way. I think even my experience of running Leigh Steinberg, the sports agency, allowed me to learn how to communicate highly complex ideas, high frequencies, and transcode them to someone that may have an 8th grade education. That may be able, as you say, you're so good at simplifying things. And one of the frequencies that I'm most curious about is your last book, because I've evolved. I was just in a movie, Beyond the Secret, with Asaroff and Proctor and all those guys. And The Secret was one of the things that I attracted into my life that started changing the way I looked at things, because I was just in a bad place when it came out. And my wife was so spiritual and would tell me I'm lost. And I'd look at her like, I'm lost? You know how much money I make? What are you talking about? And then when I transformed, I told her I was so lost. You were so right. But your philosophy of the laws of attraction, are more evolution.
I have my own take on these, but that book, and I believe, and The Secret, and probably a lot of what you believe in terms of the law of attraction comes from a teacher known as Esther Hicks and her ability to channel an energy called Abraham. And while there is in my book Super Attractor my interpretation of Abraham Hicks and my delivery of it and my own methods for aligning with spirit, I really have to mention my greatest teacher as it relates to the law of attraction is Esther Hicks and the work of Abraham. I just see myself as a translator, as do you, right? So I can take some principles that maybe somebody may not find because it isn't their path, and I can demystify those principles, put them into methods that are really resonant to me and how I've applied them, and share them. But I mentioned Abraham 27 times in that book because the gift that Esther has brought forth through her mediumship has been one of the greatest gifts that the world has received, which is this genuine, grounded way of perceiving your life differently. So right now, living as a super attractor means that no matter what's happening around you, your daily devotion is to show up with a intention to feel better, an intention to see things differently. And like I said earlier, you can't just jump, and Abraham says this, you can't just jump from powerlessness to joy. You absolutely cannot. But you can, as they say with their emotional scale, you can jump from powerlessness to jealousy. And that's actually a better vibration than powerlessness. So it's reaching and guiding yourself, being present with where you are and feeling into the next best feeling.
Have you studied the Course in Miracles as well?
I've been a student of the course since 2005. I got sober in 2005, and within 3 weeks of my sobriety, my sponsor said to me, she was this like had a real smoker's voice, and she handed me this book, and she goes, "I just changed your life, kid." Thank you. And she handed me Marianne Williamson's Return to Love, and Marianne became my mentor before she became my friend. People can, I believe that you and I could be mentoring people all throughout the world without knowing them, just by writing these books. So I was deeply devoted to the work of course, to the message of A Course in Miracles. I sat in one of Marianne's audiences at the age of 26, and I sat there surrounded by many women and men that were much older than I was, or no one really looked like me in that room at the time. And I sat with my best friend, and I raised my hand and I said, "Marianne, how would you recommend that I share these messages with my generation?" And she looked at me, and she had a real psychic download in that moment. And she said, "For some reason, I really think you will. And here's what you do." And she said, "Get on your knees and ask God how he plans for you to share these messages with your generation." And I did that. I've written 8 books, and they're all very influenced by the Course. All my work is influenced by the Course.
And the interesting thing about your journey that really attracts me is that very few people, I'm a student of the course, Wayne Dyer started, but I'm also a student of Think and Grow Rich. And I have an entrepreneurial, pragmatic sense that I reconcile with a higher source and utilize in a pragmatic vibration, a blend of a higher faith with the vibration and still currency. Money was always an energy that I understood, and I give different meaning to it now through the course, but I still believe in the pragmatic vibration of being able to allow wealth to come through me for others, to create more room and expansion for what they want. How do you reconcile the lower vibrating monetary side of being an entrepreneur and a great businesswoman with these higher vibrating thoughts of, hey, I'm just, having a spiritual journey here, expanding and growing. I'm here to help and do these with, I got a mortgage, I have a 16-month-old child, and I'm married.
So, David, the reason that I've had success is because I've perceived my career from that vibrational stance. Now, have I been fully aligned in every area of my life? Absolutely not. Struggled physically. I've had, relationship things, whatever it might be. But whenever it came to my career, finances, whatever it was, I that is where I've been most aligned with with the purpose of what my work is about, with the purpose of that financial currency and abundance is a reflection of my faith in my inner abundance, right? And my mission and my work, and really aligning with the belief system that when I'm moved by my message will move the masses. And so living from that place has allowed me to have a very healthy relationship with abundance and finances. And listen, I don't know your story about your financial history, but I grew up with very, with parents who really struggled financially and instilled a belief system that there isn't enough. Through my spiritual foundation and faith, I was able to completely have a quantum shift in that area of my life. So that hasn't been a thing for me. And I say that because, it's very valuable to know what areas you're aligned, because then you can look at the areas where you're misaligned and say, how is this area any different than that one? And, what is it, the belief systems within me that are blocking that same level of alignment, that same level of ability to be a super attractor? Listen, we're all super attractors. That's what I say in my book. We're all super attractors. We just forgot. So some of us may have areas of our life. For you, it's been abundance. Abundance is an area that's flowed for you, and it continues to flow, and it flows more the more aligned you get. but maybe there was areas that weren't flowing, like alcoholism or whatever it was, right? So we have these different areas, but if we have those areas that are in alignment, they flow naturally, there's never any question, we feel completely supported at all times, we know that the universe is providing, then why wouldn't we be able to have that in the other areas too? Now,
Right.
somebody else, but the reason, the answer to the why is because of our core belief systems that have been established as children, there's areas of our life where we don't believe we're good enough. We think we're unlovable. We think that we are unworthy. So being on a spiritual path is about unpacking, unlearning, and remembering our worthiness and our lovability.
Absolutely. And being aware of those quantum abilities that we have and potentials that we have for this journey in this lifetime. And then we'll get into a whole nother conversation, but just last, being an old soul and just such a wise soul, I'd really like, in this time of compressed uncertainty and accelerated change, just one last piece of advice from all your wisdom that you would give to people to maybe change the way they look at things, so the things they look at change, give them a different perspective and attitude towards what's going on.
I think the best thing I could give people right now is the permission to feel their feelings. We're all in a pre-trauma state. So we're going to come out of this with PTSD. Not everyone, but many, many people. So the more we can become conscious and aware of the ways that our feelings are triggering us, activating us, and the more compassionate we can be towards ourselves by honoring those feelings, the less likely we will be to come out of this overactivated, hyper-aroused, and traumatized. So that's a big step.
You're incredible. I will tell you, I was getting nervous when I'm going to do a podcast with someone that I have such high expectations of. And all I have to say is, wow, you still blew me away. Even though I set the bar high, you're incredible. Everybody, I hope you go back and watch this a ton of different times and let the layers of the onion unpeel itself. It's like the course, I think. This podcast can be listened to multiple times. I'm going to listen to it a ton of times, and I look forward to our next conversation. The incredible Gabby Bernstein, thank you so much for joining me on the Playbook.
David, thank you. You're such a lovely person. Thank you so much.
Vice versa. Thank you.